Hello and welcome to the first press conference of the mayor for 2021. I wanted to take some time and review the calendar year 2020, look at some of our work plans and accomplishments, as well as look ahead to 2021. So with that, before I get into the details, the first thing that I would like to do is thank the employees and team members of the City of Spencer. Without their dedicated service and commitment to delivering the local government to the citizens, we could not do what we do every day, day in, day out. So we thank and sincerely appreciate everything that they do. I'd like to begin by recapping in 2020, I had published 3 priorities to work on. Number 1 being the investment in and the pursuit of agricultural technology companies. The second was a focus on advanced niche manufacturing, the recruitment and expansion of those jobs. And number 3 was the recruitment and execution of launching commercial air service in Spencer. And so I'd like to just review what happened in 2020 real quickly on those 3 items. On the ag tech front, COVID hit. We were scheduled with the corridor to actually attend a summit in San Francisco of the World Biotech Industry, and we were registered, ready to go out there. I believe that was in March timeframe in the spring. And the goal was to talk to companies who had a vested interest in expanding in the upper Midwest. We had made some contacts with some companies they were interested in discussing, but unfortunately, due to the pandemic beginning and the shutdown of travel, as well as the conference being canceled, the ag tech pursuit slowed and basically came to a halt. And at that point, most of our time and attention was paid on the management of COVID-19 in our community. The second, on advanced niche manufacturing, we continue to invest in businesses who are expanding, and we have attraction programs for those businesses in advanced niche manufacturing. One instance of that is a Jobs Trust Award that went to Godberson Industries here in the West Industrial Park. They were a business who expanded up from Ida Grove. They operate here in town, and I want to say there are between 25, 28 jobs now. So we appreciate that effort, and that's an example of one of our focuses on advanced niche manufacturing. Commercial air service, we had been in discussions with a air service Air Choice One, who flies out of Mason City and Fort Dodge. They're together on the same contract there. We flew down to St. Louis to have discussions with them about delivering commercial air service in Spencer. There was a community-wide survey that was completed by Air Choice One. We started to have financial discussions with the city council to find out how we could finance and support at least the test run of an operation. We had a tentative 6-month agreement that could have been executed to bring commercial air service into the airport. And again, unfortunately, this is right at the time that the COVID pandemic started. A little update on that. Air Choice One currently no longer flies in and out of, or if they don't now, it will be soon, to Fort Dodge and Mason City. That essential air service contract has been awarded to SkyWest, and SkyWest will now deliver jet service to those 2 airports. And so the dream of bringing commercial air service to Spencer remains, but we are back to square one, trying to figure out who would be the air service. We've made a commitment to try to find funds. A very quick backstory: the Essential Air Service Act, I believe, was passed in the 70s. Spencer Airport is not on that list. What that means is there's no federal funds available to supply commercial air service into this particular airport. And so we had been working with Joni Ernst's staff, I know, was researching for us on different routes to get funding for the rural areas to have connectivity back out to larger metropolitan areas, and we will continue to work with our federal legislators and the bills that are upcoming to try to find some development resources in order to keep pursuing those discussions. So those were the 3 priorities that I had coming into 2020, and that's an update of what happened during 2020 on those. As we look back in other areas of city business, we were very busy. I wanted to review a couple of those areas. Main Street, I think in Spencer, it all starts with our downtown. Whenever you travel, you hear about the Grand Avenue Boulevard, and you hear about the scenic and historic downtown area and the businesses there. And with that, we had several businesses and expansions that happened and occurred downtown. I talked to Nancy earlier today. I believe there were 7 or 8 businesses that changed storefront ownership. We had 7 or 8 different remodels that happened. Some awards were given downtown. I know the Loft by Prest won a Iowa Economic Development Authority grant. So we're continue to be excited and appreciate all the work that Main Street does downtown. Other areas, and these are not going to be in chronological order, but we're going to go through them. And I should say, I will entertain if there's any viewers who have questions during the stream. I'm happy to entertain any of those questions when I get done with the updates here. Building permits, if we look at the health of our community, are we slowing? Are we growing? Where did we rate compared to 2019, which was a normal year? There was no pandemic. If you look at what happened in 2020, we issued 282 building permits. These would include single-family, multifamily, remodel, industrial, commercial, demolitions, and all miscellaneous permits. We issued a total valuation of $27,358,000, which is an increase of $10,501,000 from 2019. The residential remodel valuations were up $506,000, and commercial remodel valuations increased $2.2 million over 2019. It was a great year for construction and development in the city of Spencer. I believe that shows it's a leading health indicator of a city. Are you growing? And permits are certainly a good place to look at that. We mentioned the Jobs Trust Initiative. There was a gift of $75,000 that went to Godberson Metal Works for the expansion and creation of jobs out in the West Industrial Park. Retail Kickstarter remains a strong program in Spencer. We'd like to thank our financial partners, the banks in town, for their support of the Retail Kickstarter program. There was $36,500 awarded and invested into local retail businesses in 2020. It was a combination of revolving and forgivable loans. The recipients were Game State, the Loft at Prest, as well as Vermeer Glass. So we'd like to thank those businesses for taking the time to expand and move into Spencer. Some other items in 2020, we did transition over to the new City Hall. I believe we're settling in nice. With that, technology has been a big component, upgrading our technology. We now are able to do this. We can live stream to you. We can have archived recorded videos in Facebook as well as YouTube. You can watch your council meetings now, not only on SMU, but also through these other multimedia formats. And so the goal of the staff and the elected officials in 2018-19 was to make sure that we built this facility in such a manner that we could have better messaging and connectivity out to the citizens, and I believe we were on track for that. In the summer, we had a Black Lives Matters protest here in town. It all handed through the day. It was peaceful. There were no incidents of violence or destruction. It was executed well. What I'd like the citizens to know is that when we became aware of that event, we immediately put a plan in place together with regional leadership to make sure that our community was safe, the protesters were safe, as well as the businesses downtown. And I'd like to thank all of the multiple agencies that participated in that, as well as all the citizens. We asked for any tips that you might have or things that you might hear are happening, and you were very responsive to that request, and we appreciate all of that. Should there be protests again in the future, I'm highly confident that the team is put together to be able to accommodate and handle those in our community. We completed a comprehensive housing study, as well as the corridor did a labor shed job study. Some interesting things of note: housing continues to be a strong need in our community. We saw the development of the second phase of Windcrest by the South Park Mall with apartments and condos. We saw the completion of several new houses in a couple different developments in town. Through the council, we authorized the new construction and rezoning of a older part of town that was developed that's going to be redeveloped now with newer housing that's at an affordable level. And so all of these things are combining to, again, show signs of economic prosperity here in town. I'd like to thank the developers and the council, as well as the citizens who are purchasing these units and moving into them. I wanted to share a stat with you related to the labor shed study. So there are, according to the labor shed study by the Corridor, we thank the Corridor for their completion of this, it was accounted for that 7,391 people hold employment here in Spencer. Of those numbers, 4,394 commute into Spencer, or 59.5%. So 60% of our workforce commutes into town, and 2,997, so 3,000 work and live here in Spencer, and 2,440 of the citizens commute out to their job. The interesting stat, when you overlay that with the housing study, is that of those commuters that come into town, about 40 to 45% were interested in living in Spencer if they could. And so as a council, we continually look for comparable housing and housing development in different areas to meet that need and demand. If we're going to grow the footprint of our community and increase the number of citizens living here, the commuter traffic is a great first place to start. We recently purchased in November, I believe it was, about 100 acres on the west side of town. This is exciting for the city of Spencer. The reason for the purchase was related to coming out of the housing study and the demand for growth. We now have a parcel that we can structure in such a way to strategically grow the community, and we look forward to seeing how that develops. We implemented, with Amanda's leadership, city boards and commissions onboarding process. It had been several years, if not maybe a couple decades, before we had done any orientation or training of all of the committee and boards and commissions in the community that the citizens serve on. And so Amanda created and led multiple sessions of onboarding for the citizens in their role in city government in that process. We revamped the council committee structure. We increased from 5 to 7 committees. The reason for that was now every council person can chair a committee and they can champion initiatives within those committees. If you'll notice, a lot of times at our council meetings, they're very transactional, and that's because a lot of the prior discussion revolving around the items that actually come up on the city agenda are discussed in committee. So if there are citizens who have an interest in hearing those discussions, I would recommend attending or tuning into the committee meetings. If you have any questions, let me know. We added a full-time position to the Parks Department. This has been an ongoing discussion. We finally pulled the trigger on that and added that position. The primary reason for that, we now have 18 miles of trail. We now have, I believe when the park plan was done, we have more green acres per citizen than the average community. And we had not developed our staff numbers along with the number of acreage and trail miles that we continued to build over the last 30 years. And so that position has been added, and I believe you'll see continued and improved maintenance in our parks. We continue with WOW project recommendations. So you'll see, I think in the next 60 to 90 days, some significant projects that are outcomes of the park master plan study that came out. You'll see some recommendations that come to the council about how to allocate some funds to some major projects. These might include things like a splash pad, campground renovation, as well as a handful of other developmental projects that have been discussed. So again, that's another sign, I believe, of a prospering community. We completed a personnel wage study and the approval of a new pay matrix. It's been one of the goals of the elected officials and key staff leadership to be an employer of choice in our community. And I believe through that process of leadership by the key city staff that we were able to complete that wage study and recommend how we compensate in the future. We also completed a traffic flow study through downtown as well as the north end of Grand Avenue. That was completed in March or May. I'd have to double check that. And the goal there is to be able to figure out how we upgrade our traffic light system and how we update the lanes and the flow and the handling of traffic through downtown and out through the north part of town. And so I believe you'll see some outcomes discussed and some projects come out of that. We did a renewed emphasis on the sidewalk program. Just a reminder that the city will pay for the concrete if you redo your sidewalk in front of your home on your lot. And we had renewed interest in that. I believe last year was the highest year in the last 5 or 6 years. And we have over, I want to say, 430, 440 participants since the inception of the sidewalk cement program. Phase 2 by Windcrest Mall we mentioned. We updated our safety routes to school. You'll see new trail and sidewalk by Walmart. That was beginning to become a dangerous intersection for pedestrians to cross by the stoplights, and that has now been updated, as well as some new sidewalk by East Leach Park for the kids to walk to school, trying to keep them a little more safe. In October, we hosted the Northwest Iowa League of Cities meeting at Wheezy's. This was exciting because, number one, it was the largest group that Wheezy had been able to serve since the COVID restrictions started, and we got to talk with fellow peers who are elected officials in Northwest Iowa about the different programs and incentives and growth that we have in Spencer. Excuse me. This year marks the 150th anniversary for Spencer. I'd like to congratulate and thank the Chamber for their planning of the events that are going to occur this year. I believe there'll be 2 main time frames. One will be in June during Flag Fest, and then one in October, I believe, celebrating 150 years in Spencer. The rocket slide, I've had a lot of questions related to the rocket slide. When I took office, it was a hot topic, and it simmered away a little bit and came back beginning of the year, springtime or so, and I made a commitment to find the rocket slide. We found it. It is now in the possession of the, well, it's always been in the possession of the city, but now it's actually a work in progress through the No Boundaries program. A group of high school students are now in charge of the project. They have found different fabricators, places to revamp the equipment, and the goal is going to be in the future, hopefully this summer, you will see a restored rocket slide somewhere around Spencer, and it will be operational. It'll be functioning, and it's a historic landmark. Throughout the country, there was a wave of these that occurred during the Cold War era, the NASA era, and I believe it's an important part of history in Spencer, and so it's exciting to see the Parks Department and No Boundaries and Eric Johansson? Okay. Provide leadership to make that happen. Also, I've had a lot of questions this year. Highly contested presidential race. There was a lot of signage. Just wanted to restate that there's no time frame on signs related to elections, and it's a First Amendment issue. And so the Supreme Court of the United States has ruled several times in favor of First Amendment and freedom of speech. And so I want you to know that we did field a lot of calls. We did address those calls. And at the end of the day, it's a First Amendment right for people to display those signs. We revamped our budgeting process and our agency allocation process. I believe it's more transparent and informative now, both to the elected officials as well as the general public. This is budget month, February. This is when we get to the aspect of finalizing the different numbers in the budgets, and we have to have those into the state by March. And so the work schedule from today through the end of the month you're going to see is very heavily weighted towards finance. We overhauled and transformed the Spencer Industries Foundation into the Spencer Economic Development Corporation. The main reason for this was to streamline the decision-making process, as well as make it a little more nimble of an organization to be able to handle initiatives as they come up. And I want to thank everyone's leadership in that aspect. Several of the SIF board members, and Amanda and Kylie and Steve Pick, and all those people who put the time in to transform that organization from the Industries Foundation into the Economic Development Corporation. We have Covered that. Storm sewer separation project on West 4th Street went very smooth. We continue to try to separate out the storm sewer from the sanitary sewer. The city's done a really good job over the last 15, 20 years doing that, and we will continue to work on that. I do get asked if the entire town is separated. The entire town is not separated, but we do have enough of it separated now that we are no longer under an EPA order to continue to separate, and so we do appreciate the investment in that. On the economic development side, another project was the city sold some property to Schoeneman Brothers on the north part of town, and you'll see that they're in the process of erecting an expansion out there. And so we want to thank them for their continued investment in the city. Park master plan, again, you're going to see the final recommendations, I think, now when it comes to the monetary investment level of how to move forward with those projects. If you do have feedback and you have either concerns or support, I do encourage everyone as we have discussions on these large projects to contact your city council representatives. It was a dry year, so there was no flooding. That's not been the norm the last 4 or 5 years. We don't know what 2021 will bring, but as it relates to flooding, just a reminder to please check the new 100-year flood mark locations. Some properties went in, some properties went out. Everybody should have been notified by the city of Spencer in the year 2020 as to if your property was going to be impacted. ATV and golf cart ordinance was one of the initiatives that we passed this spring. You can now operate golf carts as well as ATV, UTV vehicles on city streets. So everyone has been, I think, pretty mindful of staying in the rules and regulations of the traffic laws. We haven't had a significant amount of incidents related to bad actors on that ordinance, and so just thank you to everyone for your patience getting that ordinance through, and I've had a lot of good feedback on that. COVID-19. So I looked in my notes, March 17th, 2020 was when Governor Reynolds passed the emergency declaration of a health proclamation for a health disaster. We are approaching, in a month and a couple weeks, 1 year of operating under COVID-19 guidelines. It's been a year I don't believe that anybody could have predicted on February 1st, 2020. Now that we sit here on February 1st, 2021, what 2020 could have looked like. People's lives have been disrupted. We've gotten through it. We're going to get through it no matter what occurs. But I want you to know, as I've stated before, that we take the management of the city very serious. And when this all broke loose and the governor passed a lot of sanctions or rules regarding the operation of businesses, how you could socially gather, what you could do, in order to get you the best information and coordinate the fastest response, we formed a COVID-19 task force. We continue to utilize that task force. We meet daily. As the task force has talked a lot, I think in the last month and a half or so. In the beginning, in the spring and early summer, the government was pretty key in getting messaging out because a lot of it dealt with things you could and couldn't do based on government orders. Now we're really more in the aspect of, I think, the healthcare phase of COVID-19. So now we're talking about vaccines and, health protocol with your caregivers. And so the city still remains involved, but I think you're going to hear more from the public health aspect of it and healthcare provider feedback on how to handle this pandemic moving forward. And what 2021 holds, we don't know. I just want you to know that whatever it holds, we continue to monitor and take it seriously. We added recycling roll-off containers to Hy-Vee. The Walmart ones went very well the year before, and we'd just like to thank the citizens for keeping those areas clean and utilizing the bins to recycle. Our golf course and our pools and our ball diamonds stayed open this summer through the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to thank everyone, all the families, all the volunteers, all the workers that were able to put the proper protocols in place to keep those activities open. It's important to stay active. One other thing that we started was the mayor press conferences. We moved from a solely TV interview aspect to more of a multimedia aspect, and we continue to get those initiatives out and move them forward. And with that, that would complete the 2020 wrap up. As we look to 2021, We're formalizing and finalizing what our 2021 goals are. We will continue to push towards the development of business. We will continue to look at housing as a priority. And when I say housing, I specifically mean multiple tiers of affordability as it relates to housing. I believe we'll have discussions about the renovation of houses, the purchase of dilapidated properties to renovate them, new construction, whether it's apartments or duplexes or houses. We're very cognizant of the fact that in order to stay a progressive and growing community, we need to stratify the housing availability that is on the market. And so with that, I would entertain any questions. Do we have any questions come through? We're good? All right. Well, thank you for tuning in. That was a 2020 wrap-up. And as we get more concrete goals in 2021, we will have them available at the next press conference. Take care, God bless, and stay safe.